How
Yep.
about now? Can you guys see that
Yep.
now?
We can
Okay.
see it. Good. Thank you.
My apologies. Thank you. Okay, so some of the things that we're going to cover today, we're going to first go over some broad things to keep in mind. We're going to talk a little bit about voter registration, about absentee voting. We're going to talk about the many ways that we work at the local, county, and state level to ensure election security and that your vote is counted accurately and is secure. We're going to talk about becoming an election worker, or what we call elections inspectors, or what the Secretary of State calls democracy MVPs. And then we'll get into your questions and specific issues, whatever you want. So without further ado, these pictures here are some submissions from a student art contest that we had this year for high school students, or really K through 12 students throughout Macomb County, to design the I voted sticker that folks get after they vote. And so these, the one in the middle with the two hands and your vote matters, was our winning submission from a student from Lakeshore High School. And then some of the other ones that we submit. But I offer that to let you know that it's important to remember that voting, we know, is a learned behavior. These are habits that people develop over time. Nobody is born a quote unquote good voter or a quote unquote bad voter. People need to learn how to vote, and typically we watch our parents, we watch other people as when we're younger and before we get of age, and then we become 18. And, we kind of develop these habits over time. But in the last 2 years, the voting landscape in Michigan has changed drastically. And so we're seeing people are slowly starting to update their habits. But part of this is to make sure that you have good habits in place so that you can become a good or maintain to be a good voter. Today, as it were, is National Voter Registration Day. So hopefully you'll be able to take some of the information that we talk about today and either get registered yourself, or if you know somebody who needs to register to vote, you can find out how easy it is, and you can perhaps guide them to do that too. One thing to keep in mind, I know that students at Macomb represent all different demographics, all different ages, different communities and whatnot. But I want to put something before you that I just read this online the other day, that this will be the first election, or this year is the first year of elections where people from the millennial generation and Generation Z together will make up the majority of eligible voters in the country for the first time ever. Now, it's not predicted that millennials and Gen Z will be the majority of participating voters. And that's because, again, back to the habits, we have baby boomers and other generations that have formulated these habits of being regular voters, and so are still expected to be the majority of the electorate. But really, millennials and Gen Z, you're coming into your own, and pretty soon you're going to represent, right now you represent the majority of eligible voters, and with a little bit of leaning in, soon you'll be able to represent the majority of actual voters. And then we'll really start to see policy responses, I think, shift from the priorities from one generation to another. So it really is a historic moment in our nation's history, and as one generation is kind of ascending, it's really exciting to watch and see what that means for our democracy. One important thing, the last thing on this slide I want to leave you with is that we're in this hypercharged political environment where we're having these national debates about voting and how to vote and all this stuff, not to mention the other debates that we have. But I think it's important for people to remember that there are certain federal laws that govern how we do voting, but really the rules for voting are set on the state by state level. So a lot of times we'll hear things, or someone on the national level will assert something, or a comment will be made that won't necessarily that will apply to voters in other states and not necessarily in Michigan. And so I think it's an important reminder, as we get so much information through social media, through broadcast media and others, that to take everything with a grain of salt, and to always, when in doubt, ask a clerk, because the rules could be different in Michigan. For example, there are certain states where if you have a felony on your record, that there are barriers to you being able to register to vote and participate in the process. That's never been the case in Michigan. Once somebody is serve their sentence and comes back into society after serving their time, there's no barrier for them to re-register and to vote. That's not the case in other states. But consequently, wherever I go, inevitably, people in Michigan still have this misconception that if you have a felony on your record, that you're not eligible to vote, which is absolutely not true. But that is the case in some other states. So it's just an important reminder that while we read things online or hear people say things about voting, it's really important to find out how that applies to Michigan, because it's not the same everywhere in the United States. So as today is National Voter Registration Day, I want to start out talking about voter registration. You know, it's forget what you read. There are not 24 hours in the day. There's really 960 hours in Election Day, because while Election Day is still November 3rd, 2020, and your neighborhood polling locations will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Election Day, citizens will start to be able to cast votes in this election starting this Thursday, September 24th, because that's the first time that the absentee ballots will be mailed out from local clerks to people who have requested them. And as we'll discuss later on, people can start voting absentee. So instead of having an election day, we really have this 6.5 week window of elections that is really going to be happening for the next 6.5 weeks. Now, the first step in participating is registering to vote. Which this is a sample of it's simply a matter of filling out a form to identify who you are and signing it and registering you to vote. Your registration does not go away once you register. Even if you don't participate for a couple of years, you still are registered. However, I want to introduce you to this tool that you can use. And you'll hear me say this over and over again in this presentation, because it's one of the most important things that we have in Michigan as voters, a great resource, michigan.gov/vote. Michigan.gov/vote is what we call the Michigan Voter Information Center. It's run by the Secretary of State's office. And on that website, you can register to vote online. You can check the status of your current registration. You can find out where your local polling location is. You can find out how to contact your local clerk. You can find out where the drop boxes are in your community. So if you're voting absentee and you wanted to drop off your absentee ballot or your application, you can find out where to do so. And perhaps most importantly, especially for people who are voting absentee, it's a way that you can track your ballot from the time that you apply for an absentee ballot to the time that the clerk sends you your ballot to the time that you return it. It can all be tracked online there. So it's an important way to confirm that your vote is actually being counted. So again, michigan.gov/vote. You're going to hear me talk about that a bunch of times, but I wanted to hit that real hard up front. Voter registration is as simple as filling out a form. You can do it on mail, by mail, online. You can download the voter registration form at the Secretary of State's website, which you just simply Google Michigan Secretary of State elections. It'll take you there. You can go to michigan.gov/vote. You can go to our website, which is macombgov.org/elections. And pretty much, if you just Google register to vote in Michigan, you can find this. Download this form, fill it out. You can send it back in the mail. You can drop it in person. One of the recent changes in our election law says that whereas before you had to be registered to vote 30 days in advance of the election. That's no longer the case. Now, anybody who is otherwise eligible can register to vote up to and including on Election Day, which is a great thing because as I stated before, students are busy, people are busy with their lives, and oftentimes people don't tune into elections until the last 2 weeks before an election and really get into the issues. Well, before under the previous law, you were by that time you've already missed your opportunity. Now you can register to vote up to and including on Election Day. The catch is that 2 weeks out from Election Day, October 20th this year, you can't do it through the mail or online anymore. You have to go do it in person so that they can confirm your identity in person. So you still can register to vote up to and including Election Day, but in that last 2 week window from October 20th through November 2nd, you have to go in person to your city or township clerk. So you basically go to your city hall, your township offices, you present your ID and can confirm your residency. This slide shows you some of the things that you can use to verify your residency, including your driver's license or a state ID card. If you don't have either of those, there's a combination of things right there, including a utility bill, a bank statement, a paycheck, a government check, or other government document that has your name and your current address would allow you to register to vote. Now, where you vote is at your typical polling location. The precincts are basically neighborhoods. They're drawn, and every precinct will have a polling location. Usually it's a school, a church, a fire station. Places like that are typically where people vote on election day. And as we will talk about, you can also vote absentee by mail as well. So again, where you find out your precinct is michigan.gov/vote. You can type in your address, and it'll tell you exactly where you go to vote on election day. That's a picture right there of what it looks like on at the Michigan Voter Information Center, and all the information that you can find. So if you chose to vote on election day, as I said before, polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And if you find yourself in line to vote at 8 p.m. After the polls close, as long as you're in line, you are still eligible to vote. They have to, by law, let anybody who's shown up to vote by 8 p.m. To allow them to vote. So if you are intent on voting and you find yourself in that location, in that situation, make sure you stay there in line. Now, when you show up at a polling location, there'll be election workers there, poll workers. We'll talk about them more later on, but you check in with them and they will verify your identity. They will issue you your ballot, and they'll usher you to a private location where you'll have a little booth where you'll be able to mark your ballot. And then they'll also give you assistance by slipping your completed ballot through the tabulator to make sure that it gets counted. So one feature that you'll see on every ballot, whether it's absentee or at the location, is the ability to vote a straight party ticket. If this is one with one stroke of the pen, with filling in one oval, you can choose to vote a Republican Party ballot, Democratic Party, or any number of the so-called lesser parties, the smaller parties, and then every person, every candidate who's on the ballot with that party will receive your vote. You still would have to go to the second part of the ballot, which was the nonpartisan and proposal section, which will have people who don't run with a party affiliation, people like judges, candidates for school board. Macomb Community College trustee is a nonpartisan election that'll be on the November ballot, as well as certain proposals that may be for your local community, tax proposals. This season, there are a lot of marijuana ordinances that local communities are putting on the ballot that you'll have to decide on depending on where you live, as well as a few statewide proposals. So those are important to know that your straight party ticket will not fill those out, but it will take care of the partisan section of your ballot. So everything from president down to likely county commissioner or your township offices if you live in a township. One important thing to remember about a straight party ticket, for example, if you wanted to vote a straight party for one of them, but then you saw one candidate of a different party that you wanted to vote for as well, you can still fill in the oval for your straight party ticket. And then once you get to that race, you can cross over and fill in the oval for the candidate of the other party. And just for that one race, if you fill in another oval, that'll supersede your straight party ticket just for that race. So for example, if I wanted to fill in a Republican Party ballot, I'd fill in the straight party ticket, but then if I wanted to cast a vote for a Democratic dog catcher, let's say, I can cross over, fill in the oval next to his or her name, and then for that race only, it would count my vote all for my Republican votes, but Democrat for that one particular race for dog catcher in this example. But then I would still have to go onto the nonpartisan section to vote for my judges and my local proposals and statewide proposals. Now, at every polling location, there is what is known as a voter assist terminal. We call it express vote machine, which is specifically designed to help enable anybody who's got an ADA-related barrier to voting. These are mandated by federal law to be in every single polling location across the state of Michigan. So if in the event that you or someone in your family or someone that you know has any kind of is any kind of differently abled, they can utilize this machine. Similarly, if you are in at a polling location and you want to cast your vote through this machine, you absolutely have the right to do that, provided that there's nobody else that needed to use it, and you just tell your election worker that you want to do it that way. It has a touch screen. It has headphones that are available. It can read things for people who it can have a printed instructions differently for people who need that. It has other instructions for different levels of ability. So be on the lookout for your voter assisted terminal. That's something that anybody can use. And once the ballot is marked, it's counted and tabulated the exact same way as regular ballots. Now, when you go to the polling location, Michigan does have a voter ID law, and so you will be asked to show your ID when you show up to vote. Now, if you don't have your ID with you, you still are able to vote, and that's an important thing to remember. The types of IDs that you can use are a Michigan driver's license or state ID, which is really the best way and the easiest way. They will accept a driver's license or ID card from another state, a federal or state government issued photo ID, U.S. passport, military ID, student identification from Macomb would also count, or a tribal identification card with photo. However, if you don't have any of those IDs, you still can vote. You cannot have an ID on you and refuse to present it. That's the way that the election worker can refuse to give you a ballot. However, if you legitimately don't have your ID with you, if you left it at home, or if you don't have an ID, you can ask to sign an affidavit of identity, which you would sign a short piece of paper attesting to the fact that you are who you are, and they would issue you a ballot that would be included with all others and counted on election day. It's much easier just if you have a driver's license or state issued ID, just to present that and get your ballot. But in the event that you don't, you do have an option to sign that affidavit of identity. Now, a lot of thought has been put into how do you conduct elections during the pandemic. Luckily, in August, we had our statewide primary, and our local clerks and county clerks across the state were able to kind of test out this new world order. And all the polling locations will have PPE in the form of masks, gloves, hand sanitizer, surface wipes, and other kinds of PPE to make sure that while you're in this public space, that you are kept safe, and we do everything that we can to mitigate the spread of COVID. It's important to keep the workers who are there safe, but it's also important for the public. And so we also have amended our requirements in terms of where the voting booths are positioned so that there's more social distancing, and a lot of thought's been put into that. This is a picture here of us receiving some of the PPE before the August election. Now, again, while the voter registration law changed recently, another one of the biggest changes in Michigan election law to happen in a generation is implementation of what we call no reason absentee voting. Absentee voting basically is another way of saying voting by mail. It's a way that senior citizens and overseas military personnel have voted for literally decades. And absentee ballots are cast and tabulated and weighted the exact same way as ballots that are cast on election day. Again, this is one of those misconceptions that's out there. Sometimes you hear people talk about that absentee ballots are only counted when the election is close, or some other reasons why it's not as good. Absentee voting, absentee ballots are exactly equal as ballots cast on election day. Again, michigan.gov/vote. You can apply for an absentee ballot through online. You can apply to have a ballot sent to you up to the Friday before the election. So that would be, for us, October 30th. You can still apply for an absentee ballot to be sent to you. However, we recommend that you do it a little bit earlier, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Michigan.gov/vote, you can download the absent voter application. It's simply a matter of filling out a short form, and you have to sign it. And one of the important things is making sure that your voter signature, your signature on the application matches the way that you vote, the way that you sign for your driver's license, because it's that signature that they match up to verify you are who you say you are. And of course, it is a crime to represent yourself as somebody else of who you are not. Those applications are also available all over the place on different clerks' websites, on our website as well. The permanent absentee voter list, this is more of a long-term thing. This is more about reinforcing good habits. Every clerk in Macomb County and most through the state of Michigan, these are local city and township clerks, maintains a permanent absentee voter list. This means that you are on a list, and prior to every election, no matter a big election like the presidential one we're about to have, or a small election like we sometimes have in May or February or August even, you'll be on this permanent absentee list if you sign up, and they will send you an application to vote to request your absentee ballot. I recommend this for everybody because it does not mean that you have to vote absentee, but if nothing else, it serves as a great way to remind you that there's an election coming up. When you get that absentee application in the mail, you have the option to fill it out, send it back to your clerk, and vote absentee. But if nothing else, it tells you there's an election coming up, and maybe you have to do some research to figure out what's on the ballot and if it's worthy of your attention. So permanent absentee voter lists are a great tool, again, to make sure that you have strong habits and strong voting habits. And then you can check out our website, macombgov.org/elections, to sign up for that. Absentee voting, step by step, the first step is to submit that application that we just talked about. You have to send in an application for every election and request it. This year has been a little bit different because of COVID, and so there have been applications that allowed a voter to request an absentee ballot for August and for November. So some people did that earlier in the year, but typically for an election, you have to submit an application, a new application for every election. So once you send that in, the clerk will ready your ballot. On September 24th, this Thursday, the first batch of absentee ballots will be sent from the clerks to voters like yourselves, and you should receive that a couple days later. The next step is for you to fill out that ballot, give whatever thought that you need to, do whatever research you need to. And as an aside, this is one of the great things about voting absentee is that, number one, you never have to worry about where you vote. Number two, you never have to worry about waiting in line or hurrying back across town if you're at school or at work and worried about childcare or missing that window. Absentee ballot allows you to request that ballot, have it at home, and to take your time and to do research, because inevitably, especially in an election like November, it's going to be a long ballot with a lot of different things to decide. And inevitably, you show up at the polling location and realize, holy cow, I didn't realize we were voting on this race today. And oftentimes that leads people to make decisions based on a whole bunch of factors, as opposed to being able to research it and make a really thoughtful decision. So absentee ballots, I think, help make more thoughtful voting choices. So after you've completed your ballot, you can return it a couple different ways. If you do, the first step is you put it back in the envelope, and the instructions will prompt you to sign the outside of the ballot. This is an important way that they verify that it's actually you that is casting the ballot. And so you sign it, and then you can either drop it in the mail. Every absentee ballot requires 2 stamps, and you put it in the mail and it gets back to the clerk. Again, you can utilize michigan.gov/vote to track your ballot and confirm exactly when it's received. There's been a lot of talk about the pressures put on the Postal Service because of COVID and other things. And so we are urging people, the post office has urged people to not, if you submit your ballot via mail, October 20th is really the deadline where you can be at, what they say guarantee receiving your ballot back to the clerk. That's about a 2-week window. They say allowed 15 days to get it back there. Maybe it'll go quicker, but October 20th is a good date to think about in terms of getting it back in the mail. However, there are a lot of other ways that you can get your ballot back to you. Similarly, clerks have drop boxes that are available 24/7. Depending on the community, they're either at City Hall, township offices. Some of the bigger communities have them throughout the community at fire stations or other areas. Again, go to michigan.gov/vote. You can click on your clerk and figure out where their drop boxes are. It's important that you utilize the drop box in your community. If you live in Warren, you don't want to drop off your absentee ballot in a drop box in Sterling Heights, because that way it won't necessarily go as quickly to your clerk as possible, and it might cause some headaches for you or for the clerk. But again, that's why you got this verification tool at michigan.gov/vote to check to make sure that it gets where it needs to go. But utilize those drop boxes. Or you can go in during regular business hours to your city or township clerk and either request an absentee ballot. You can receive the absentee ballot and vote it right there at the clerk's office and turn it in, or you can receive it and take it home with you and then come back and drop it off at a later time. But again, michigan.gov/vote is your #1 tool for figuring out how to get all this stuff done. We talked a little bit about drop boxes. Here's a picture of the one at the Sterling Heights City Hall, and Sterling Heights has about 6 of them throughout their community for people to take advantage of. Now, there's a lot of talk, again, in this environment about election security and making sure that your vote is counted. And again, I want to reiterate that absentee ballots are counted the exact same way that ballots at the polls are counted, and it's a legitimate way to cast your vote. You'll see at that envelope there is the box where you have to sign your name. This is one of the biggest things that leads people's ballots to not be counted, is that they forget to follow the instructions and forget to sign that box, because that's an important way to verify that that the voter is who they say they are by matching up that signature. There's a lot of talk. People speculate about dead people voting and whatnot. This is a picture here of somebody in my office, Gosei, one of our clerks. One of the things that we do as clerks, apart from voting, is running elections, is also the death records as well. So we check every month we check death records against the voter records to make sure that we have we don't have anybody who's not supposed to be on the rolls. I don't know where we're getting this artwork from, but it's really enjoyable. So poll workers, we talked a little bit about verifying your identity and a little bit about that. We have these tabulator machines that Macomb County has selected that are state-of-the-art tabulation systems. And at the end of the night, the elections inspectors they take the ballots, they count them all out, they balance it all out to make sure that the number of ballots that were issued matches the number of votes that were cast, and then they transmit those results to the clerk at the city or township hall. We do rigorous testing of all these tabulators to make sure that they count what they're supposed to be counting. That's a lot of our work leading up to Election Day, to make sure these machines are all in proper working order. And we additionally have machines in some of the larger communities, like this one represented here, that have that do the counting. And again, we rigorously test them to make sure that they're accurate, to ensure an accurate count. And none of the machines are linked up to the internet when not in use. They're only online for a very small amount of time when they're transmitting results. And I don't want to say too much more about that, except that we have updated our security protocols extensively since the last election, and to put additional protections in place to make sure that there's no tampering or anything. And then the most important backstop that we have in our elections are the fact that we vote on paper ballots, whether it's absentee or in person. We always have those paper ballots. So in the event that there was a contested result at the end of an election, we have those paper ballots. So that these fine folks here you see pictured are the Board of Canvassers. There's 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. They do the double checking on all the work after the election. They double check the counts, and they double check all the protocols and the security to make sure that everything checks out. And if push came to shove and we had to do a recount, which we just did a recount in Chesterfield Township a couple weeks back, having those paper ballots is our ultimate fail-safe backstop to make sure that the true will of the voters is reflected in the election results. And the most important piece of election material, election equipment, are our elections inspectors. And I urge people who are interested in the process, interested in elections, maybe not so much in the partisan part. This is a nonpartisan way to participate in elections and to serve as an elections worker. You contact your local clerk or the community that you want to work in. It is you do get a stipend for working the election. And you help the clerks staff the polling locations, count the ballots, and really the elections could not happen without these wonderful men and women who do this work. So that can be anybody. So if that's something that is of interest to you, check out michigan.gov/democracy-MVP. You can find out a little bit more about what it entails and see if that's something that you want to do to participate. So I recognize that is a lot of information that came at you very, very quickly. But I want to put out this my contact information so that we can continue the discussion. If there's something that you had a specific question about that isn't answered today, feel free to email me there or call me. Those are both my direct email and phone number, and I'm happy to go over any questions or comments or issues that you want to talk about. So with that, Jamie, I'll conclude my comments and turn it over for questions or comments from anybody. And again, thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Awesome. All right, can you guys hear me again? Thumbs up. Okay. So I'm excited that we got a ton of questions. I thank our instructors, as I think it looks like they were asking specifically that students provide their information and ask questions during this. So I'm going to get through as many as I can, and we'll just take it as it goes. So the first, and I'm just going to go in order. The first one, and if I get your question wrong, if there's like a typo and I'm not getting the true nature of it, feel free to unmute yourself and correct me. So this first one is, my question is, and I believe it was supposed to be, I lived in Troy 8 years ago. Do I need to register to vote? If yes, where? So I think they're saying that they've moved. What needs to happen now so that they can vote, if anything?
Typically, if you went and updated your driver's license to reflect your new address, then typically they will prompt you to change your voter registration as well. Again, go to michigan.gov/vote, and you can put in your information and see where you are registered. You should register at the place where you sleep at night, and keep your registration there. However, if you do want to order, if you want to vote at your where you grew up or something, if you're still registered there, you can cast an absentee ballot or go vote in person. But you typically should update your registration if you have moved.
Okay. This one's kind of along the same lines. If I move but stay in the same county, do I have to register again?
Yep, even if you move within Macomb County or you move from one community in Oakland County to another community in Oakland County, you do need to re-register. Again, you would still be able to be eligible to vote at your old location, but you really should vote where your ID is, where your driver's license is registered, or where you currently sleep at night.
Okay. Next question. I would love to work as a poll worker, but I live in Lapeer County and they don't need any more workers. Can I work as a poll worker outside of my district? And if so, how would I go about applying?
You sure can. You can volunteer to work as an elections worker in any community that needs you. Contact. So there's two ways. Go to that website, michigan.gov/democracy-MVPs. You can get put on a list that the Secretary of State provides to all the clerks statewide who are having problems or who want to recruit other people. Or for best results, if you want to contact a clerk directly, like for example, the Warren City Clerk or the Sterling Heights City Clerk or the Flint City Clerk, whatever, contact them directly and let them know you're interested in signing them up. Those are the local city and township clerks are the ones that do the hiring. They partner with county clerks on the training, but every elections worker would get trained up before election day, but it's the local clerks that make the decision on who to include.
Awesome. This was covered, but it doesn't hurt to go over it again. I'm almost positive I'm registered to vote, but how can I double check if I am?
It may sound a little bit like a broken record, but michigan.gov/vote. It's a fantastic tool that you can confirm where you're registered to vote. And if you need to update your registration, you can do it at that site, or you can do it in the ways that we talked about before.
All right, next one is asking for some advice. What are some good ways to approach a person who doesn't think their vote matters and who may even get defensive about talking about the subject?
That's a great question, and it's a really a thorny issue because in times like these, when we are more polarized as a society as we've ever been, it is hard to talk about politics, and it is hard to talk about not even about issues or parties or candidates, just to talk about the process of voting is so very, very, it can get to be contentious. But again, I would share the information about michigan.gov/vote and urge people to check to make sure, number one, that they're registered, because that way maybe their mind changes or they get turned on closer to the election and then they want to vote. Having people know that they're able to is so very, very important. So make sure that the first part is that make sure that they get registered to vote, especially as this is National Voter Registration Day. But also, I think that there have been, it's important to realize that because we are so divided as a country, the margins that decide elections, which really decide decisions and policies, is narrower than it has ever been, which means that every vote counts. So whether you're the most right-wing conservative or you're the most lefty liberal, either way, presumably you're driven by policies and issues that make you believe what you believe. And everyone can recognize there's a lot at stake in this election. And with it being so close from the presidential election on down, every single vote matters and counts, and more so now than ever before. Here in Macomb County, we had a number of local races. I shouldn't say a number. We had a local race last year, and then one a couple of years back that was decided by just one vote. And those are those are to seat people on city councils and whatnot. I mentioned a recount that we did in Chesterfield Township. That was a race that was decided by 10 votes out of a population of 20,000 people. So it's more. Things are closer now than they ever have been, and which makes sure that every vote matters and ultimately counts.
All right. Is it better to vote by mail or in person?
It all depends on what works for you. I think that there's no right answer to that. I talk to a lot of people who despite me talking about how great absentee voting is now that everyone can do it, they say, well, I like to go into my polling location and vote that way. And again, it's back to what I said at the beginning. It's all about the habits that people form. And for some people, that's voting in their mind, and they want to go do that. And they want to make sure that they go into their neighborhood polling location that they're seen voting. Absolutely fine. But also absentee, now that anybody can do it, first-time voters, senior citizens, anybody can vote absentee. All the votes are tabulated and counted the exact same way. So that's really the most important thing. It's whatever works out for your individual situation, because whether you cast a ballot absentee or via a polling location, they both are counted the same way.
If my ID is expired because it's very difficult to get into SOS right now, can we still vote with the expired ID?
I am wrestling with this situation myself, as my birthday is October 6th, and then the moratorium on giving leniency for an expired license expires on September 30th. So I'm currently dealing with this. It is very hard to get an appointment with the Secretary of State to change your license. I am told that they will accept an expired license as a valid ID, and that would still count even if it is expired.
Okay. How far in advance of the election should we send in our mail-in ballots?
So that the magical day, I should say, nothing magical about it, but really, if you want to have confidence that your ballot will be delivered by U.S. mail, 2 weeks. So October 20th is really the last day that you should drop it in the mail and expect it to get back in time. But that being said, you can avail yourself to these to the drop boxes that we talked about, or go in on during regular business hours to the clerk's office and turn it over to one of the clerks there. Also, before every election, this is another change in Michigan election law. Before every election, every single clerk in every single community in Michigan must be open for at least 8 hours on the weekend before every election. Now, here in Macomb County, all the clerks opt to be open on Saturday. Now, the hours vary a little bit, but all the clerks in Macomb County are open on Saturday for you to go in. You can register to vote, request an absentee ballot, turn it in an absentee ballot. So there are a lot of options for people to get their absentee ballot back in.
Awesome. This is another one that I think was covered, but it doesn't hurt to go over it again. Will there be more safety precautions at the polls this year?
Absolutely, and this is where conducting our August election was really a great, I don't want to call it a test run because it was an important election in and of itself, but it really gave us the clerks and elections administrators across the state a real good practice running an election during a pandemic. And so like we talked about, there's extra PPE that's being made available through the state of Michigan, through the federal government, that's going to go to every polling location, so that masks, gloves, hand sanitizer, surface wipes, and all that stuff are available, as well as you'll see, like everywhere you go today, social distancing protocols are in place. So the answer to the question is yes, there are extra considerations in place to accommodate voters and election workers.
Great. Is there anyone doing a drive-through voting setup for people who don't feel safe walking into the building?
That's a great question. I know that in some counties they are doing drive-through voter registration. However, I would say if anybody has any anxiety about being out and about, that's absentee voting is tailor-made for you. It's something that you can do online, even if you're not. If you don't have access to a computer, you can have a absentee application mailed to you, fill it out, send it back in to get that. So if anybody has any kind of anxiety about it, which I certainly don't blame them, voting absentee is for you.
Won't it be chaos to manage all the mail-in votes? And what is the guarantee that there will be no missing votes?
So one thing, the more you learn about elections in Michigan, and this is one of those things that there are rules, how we apply, how we administer elections changes state by state. And in Michigan, we have a very decentralized system, meaning that while the county clerks like myself and my team are partners with the local clerks, on election day and the absentee ballots are all conducted by the local clerks. And so you have there's 1,500 municipalities in the state of Michigan. So you have 1,500 local clerks and their teams. By law, they have to recruit elections inspectors who are an equal number of Republicans and Democrats to balance out. And because it's so decentralized, there are checks and balances put into every step of the way, from issuing ballots to counting ballots to recounting and verifying that there are so many steps put in place and duplicative and very inefficient, but in its inefficiency, the duplication are the checks and balances that kind of prevent any large-scale tampering or rigging that can go on. It really makes a very secure election in Michigan. And again, unlike all states, we have that paper ballot that ultimately, if after the fact there was supposed to be a recount or or a recount was ordered and people were unsure about the ballots, we can always go back to that paper trail and really glean what votes were cast by who, and not by who, because once they're cast, it's anonymous, but to really glean the will of the people. So the more I learn about elections in Michigan, the more confident I am of the security here in Michigan anyway.
Will we know the winner on election night?
The winner of the presidency, I imagine, you mean, I mean, that's dependent on how it's going to happen in other states. Now, something that just happened last week, the current Michigan law says that if you're sending in your absentee ballot, it has to be received by your local city or township clerk by 8 p.m. on election day when the polls close. Up till now, if it came in after the fact, it wouldn't count, unfortunately. However, we just last week had a judge that said the clerks must count ballots that are postmarked ahead of election day, but maybe received after election day, have to make those count. Now, I have no doubt that decision is going to be appealed, and there's still some more legal wrangling to go on. But that's if that stands, that's a huge change for voting in Michigan. But as it stands right now, you have to have your ballot in by 8 p.m. on election day to make sure that it counts.
What happens if your mail-in ballot is rejected? Can you re-vote?
You sure can. You can request a ballot, a new ballot for any reason. If you change your mind, if you make a mistake, if you use michigan.gov/vote and find that you mailed in your ballot and it wasn't received by your clerk in a timely fashion, you can always go to your local clerk and request to have a new ballot, and then they will spoil your old ballot, because until it's actually counted, there's a number on the ballot that's that they can track, say that it was issued to you. And so up to election day, you can't do it on election day, but before election day, you can go to your local clerk and say, I want to spoil my previous ballot and get issued a new ballot, and you're allowed to do that. So if you're worried that your ballot wasn't received, or that you made a mistake, or that you simply want to change your mind, you have the power to do that.
Can you vote on some things and leave some blank? Will it still count if only half is voted?
That's a great question, and absolutely that's the case. You can vote on as many or as little of the things as you want to. None of them, you're not required to vote on everything.
Okay, and due to the current state of COVID-19, will there be more places to vote than usual to make sure social distancing is practiced?
So another great question. Now, there hasn't been any change, as far as I know, in terms of allowing for more polling locations. However, as hopefully you've gotten from my comments, the new rights for Michigan voters include the ability to vote absentee by everybody. And so that's really kind of, and again, it's a huge step forward for Michigan voters, this big change that allows everybody to vote by mail, vote absentee. And so while there won't necessarily be an increase in the number of polling locations, the mere fact that people can vote absentee, that's going to change the voting landscape an awful lot and provide protections for people. And we're starting to see voters' habits are shifting. People are starting to realize that that's a way that they can vote safely and securely, and more people are doing that.
If I register, I'm sorry, my internet's a little bad right now. If I register to vote absentee but then change my mind, can I still vote in person?
Absolutely. So if you vote absentee and you still have your ballot on your person, you can come to your polling location and surrender your ballot and be issued a ballot on election day. You absolutely can do that. However, it's important for you to know that if you have a ballot that you voted, an absentee ballot, and you want to turn it in on election day, which you can do, you cannot turn it in at your neighborhood polling location. That needs to be returned directly to your city or township clerk or in one of their drop boxes. You can't turn in your absentee ballot at your local polling location. You can, however, if you did receive a ballot and then you realize I would rather vote in person, you can go there, surrender your ballot. They would invalidate that ballot and issue you an election day ballot that you could vote then.
What happens if I don't have 2 stamps? I'm assuming they mean for, mailing in their absentee ballot.
Sure. I mean, that's why you need the 2 stamps, because it's an oversized envelope, and so the Postal Service requires that. I was told, it has been confirmed that it has been the longstanding policy of the Postal Service that even if your ballot was in the mail with no postage on it, that they would still deliver it. They place a premium on those ballots and getting them back to the clerks. That they would still deliver it, and then they would bill the clerk. However, and similarly, if you didn't have sufficient postage, they would still deliver it. However, 2020 is a crazy year, and there's crazy things going on. And so if you want to have that absolute certainty that your ballot is being counted, if you don't have stamps, really availing yourself to the option of Dropbox or going in person to your local clerk, either on regular business hours or on those weekend hours before the election, is really your best bet.
Before I move on to the next question, I want to recognize, I know it's after 1, and if you have to leave, that's totally understandable. A reminder that we will be posting this on the Student Life YouTube, and I'll be sending out a link. So if you have to leave, we understand, but as long as Fred is able to stick around a little bit longer, I'm hoping we can get through at least a few more of these questions. And just let me know when if I don't cut this off before you need to go, Fred. Next, does it matter what voting precinct I vote in? Can I vote in any precinct?
A great question. Yes, it does matter. You can only vote in the precinct where you're registered to vote. So that's why, again, michigan.gov/vote is such a great tool, because you can find out where that local polling location is for you. It's weird how they have them set up, because sometimes the place that's closest to you, to your house, may not be your polling location. Just it sometimes works out that way. Although typically it's a school or a firehouse or a police station or a church or something that's in your neighborhood typically. But yes, to answer your question, you have to go to your precinct's polling location, which you can find the address of at michigan.gov/vote.
If we aren't of voting age until the day of the election, could we still register and vote that year?
Another great question. You can, Michigan allows for pre-registration for people who are going to turn 18 on or before election day. So even if you are not 18 right now, if you're going to turn 18 on election day or before, you can register to vote and get ready to vote now.
Will I be able to assist a family member in the voting booth?
Yes, you would be able to, with that person requesting it. It's really working with those local elections inspectors who are at the polling location and kind of explaining to them that somebody would need help. But that's also what they are there for. They're also there to provide assistance. So it's something that you can provide assistance, but it really is the local the chairperson, the elections inspector that would make that determination of what that assistance would look like.
Okay. And actually, the last question that I'm going to ask today, it's the last one on the chat here, which I think is a good one. Does my presidential vote really count? From what I understand, it's more of a suggestion for the Electoral College.
The Electoral College is a weird, kind of a strange relic of the past, and you're right. It is a you're not direct. We are not directly electing the president. We're electing electors to the Electoral College that cast their vote for the presidential candidate according to population. So the voters in the Electoral College are awarded in Michigan and most every other state by congressional district. So proportionately, so for example, if you live in Michigan's 9th district, which is Southern Oakland and Southern Macomb, they would take the majority of the votes within that district, and then that would elect the elector of one particular party or another, one that was pledged to either Republican candidate or Democratic candidate or other, and then that person would go and ceremoniously cast the vote. It is kind of a relic of a bygone era, but it is the law. You have to remember that the people who are being selected to be the Electoral College, these are partisan activists, and so they're only there to cast the ballot for their candidate of choice. So assuming that all let's say, for example, Republicans in our particular congressional district, they win 50% plus one for the president, then the Republican elector would go to the Electoral College and cast that ballot. So while technically it's correct, we're not voting for president, we're voting for the elector. It's just one other step built into the process that suggests, you know, that when they get the majority rule, the majority vote, they get that elector. So, and on the ballot, it does say you're voting for the elector of the president of the United States. But it is in such a way that's so I guess to answer your question, yes, it does absolutely matter who you vote for president, because it's the majority that determines who's going to cast that vote in the Electoral College.
All right, well, we made it through all the questions. I know that you did provide your contact info, so I hope it's okay for me to say if you have further questions, feel free to email the Macomb County Clerk's office. And I just want to thank you so much for being here today. Honestly, this was very helpful to me, and I hope to many of you in attendance. So thank you so much, and we are going to end it at that. Bye, everybody.